Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And we have a program today, some items to talk about. In the news, we want to visit and talk a little bit about the World Economic Forum that's going on in Davos. But before I do that, I want to just make a comment about one of my favorite subjects, and that is sound money. Why don't we have sound money? We solve a lot of our problems. Well, we'll have to get it someday because unsound money, paper money, fiat, doesn't work. It always ends badly. It's just a matter of time. The market's more powerful than all the planners. The planners are getting us into a mess. And this week, what are they talking about? Raising the debt limit so they can spend more money, but they don't talk about where is it coming from. Oh, they mention it sort of. And you can't cut spending. That wouldn't be right. But anyway, the crisis is ongoing. It's going to get a lot worse, and people will start thinking more so about money, and they have. Even in Davos, they're talking about currencies, at least on the side, and why they have to do something someday. And there are some renegade nations that have been messed around with by dollar hegemony that they're starting to think maybe we'll have to have a substitute. Those plans are in motion, but I don't think the forum this week or so that they've been meeting up there, they talk about it, but they don't have a solution because it won't be that easy. But it certainly produces a lot of excitement in the gold markets. In the last several months, it's been much more recognizable that inflation raises a lot of prices, and the ratio of the gold to the dollar changes because we print too many dollars, and there's a limitation on how much gold can be supplied by the marketplace. So this is all in the news, and people are watching the prices go. Certainly our viewers for this program know a lot about gold, and they pay a lot of attention. And they also probably know that I do a partnership with Birch Gold, because it's a gold company, and they send out advice and try to guide people on their investments and how you can invest gold, and because everybody can't do it the same way. There's a variation. So if you're interested in following up with that message, you can get some information on the bottom of the screen. There's a message there that says text Ron 989898. And Birch Gold will receive that call, and they will send you some information to get you started or catch you up to date or just find out what they're thinking about. Because they've been in the business a while, they have a lot of good advice, and it isn't easy. Believe me, I've been watching the gold markets for a long time, and I keep my eyes and ears open for everybody that talks about gold, because I'm not looking for the perfect answer because it isn't there. But there's a lot of people know a lot more than others, and of course it's connected to the Federal Reserve System, because that's the other half of it. You have sound money and gold, and then you have the Federal Reserve, and they come clashing together, and that's what we're witnessing today, the clashing. But there's one major penalty from this, and we're suffering through it. Middle-class people and average people suffer the consequence because they pay the penalty, and that is the inflation tax. So this subject will be around for a long time. So if you are inclined, if you want to get some free information on this from Birch Gold, Ron 989898. And Chris, once again, welcome to the program, because we want to talk about the meeting going on in Davos. It's been going on for a long time. They had to suspend because of a crisis that wasn't a crisis. It was created by a crisis by the very people who couldn't have their meetings. But the World Economic Forum has been around a long time. It was like 50 years or something, and they meet every year, and you have to be rich to really be rich, but not smart. You don't have to be real smart. You just have to be rich, and then you get to go. And they have a lot of speeches, but they're definitely establishment, and they're definitely not libertarians, and they're definitely not sound money people, and they don't like to be criticized. Right now, one individual I've been keeping an eye on for several years, and that's Larry Fink. Who runs a investment company, a big one too, and he's annoyed by this. People are picking on him. He says it's getting ugly. But there is a clash, this whole thing of manipulation by authoritarians and a fiat system versus the breaking through of the obvious fact that the market's telling us it's not working very well and they're being challenged. The states in this, in the United States right now, challenging the bad investments that a lot of states have made because for some reason the establishment just rolled over and sent billions and billions of dollars for the investment at BlackRock. So anyway, Rick, what we have to do, Chris, is to pay more attention to that. And you've been doing a great job on this. So what do you have for us today?
Actually, Dr. Paul, this meeting has been getting a lot of attention. That's one thing I noticed. Everywhere that I look, I see people talking about Davos, and not in a good way. And that is something that I'm sure they do not like. They don't like that kind of attention. They may like the media's attention, but they don't necessarily, I believe, like what's happening now. And it's kind of like the Federal Reserve. They probably would rather stay where people don't even know what they're up to, what they're doing. Thanks to Ron Paul, that changed for the Federal Reserve. Many more people understand what the Federal Reserve is and what they do. But what's happening with Davos, their PR, I think they have a PR problem. Like you mentioned, Larry Fink is complaining. ESG is being viewed unfavorably. I saw interviews. People were trying to interview the CEO of Pfizer, Klaus Schwab, and they run away. They wouldn't answer even legitimate, very good questions. They would not even answer because, they were probably used to the softball media. And the questions that were being asked them were very, very good. So people, please go look up, those people that tried to interview them, because you'll see, a different side of what you see in the public media. And, one thing that crossed my mind is now that they're getting this bad media or attention, we got to watch because they're going to want to divert that attention. And I would pay attention to the Ron Paul Liberty Report and war, because we are covering it almost every day during the week. When people in power want to divert attention off themselves, they are likely to go to war. And we should all be educated and aware, to do our best to try to make that not happen.
One thing that's being reversed, because the usual technique is if you're speaking the truth, you have to be demonized. So once they respond by calling the people who are objecting being demonized, that means they're doing it. So it's sort of like in politics when they accuse one party of lying and a scandal and work with the Russian. That means they're doing it. So that's their game. That's their game they play. But for a long time, people they're just called conspirators, but conspiracies can be true too, and they've been demonized. But because of the events, it's sort of payback to the people the way they have been trying to hide and benefit from it. But I want to read a quote of an ad that they put out in 2016. And it's not up anymore, but they put it in a form of an ad, which I think is significant. And they didn't deny it, but because it met such resistance, they took it down. But I think this ad that they did, no matter what their excuses are, it means that it could be just a Freudian slip and they're speaking the truth because it sure sounds true. And this is the statement. The World Economic Forum has been the subject of considerable scorn and criticism for its 2016 ad campaign, which stated, quote, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing. I have no privacy, and life has never been better," close quote. And it sounds like it has to be a joke. It has to be from Onion or something like that. But it was a serious thing. But because of the reaction, they decided to take it down because many of them said, well, it sounds like they're against personal property ownership, which is actually what they are. They're for collectivism, but they're for super corporatism. They don't have the boots on the ground like a fascist dictator has, but they're dictatorial because they control everything else. And in the last few years, they work in combination, with the woke population, because that's exactly what they want. They want to have control. And wokeism is probably a lot better known than the World Economic Forum. And maybe they're getting jealous about it all. But the principles are the same: the authoritarians against the libertarians and limited government people. And these battles aren't all negative. These battles can be very beneficial because it sort of identifies who's fighting whom, what does have to be done. If they're just all powerful and say, well, they shouldn't do this, why don't we just modify this, why don't we change the ad program, something like that. No, this is much bigger. And we've discovered that when the governors, especially DeSantis in Florida, because they have been giving they have been giving a lot of money to BlackRock. And now they're starting to withdraw it. Texas is talking about it, and it just makes no sense for them to continue to do this. So I think the battle lines are being drawn, but I feel good about it because I think we have truth on our side. It makes more sense. It's far from a perfect system, but what we're dealing with is a system that is just rotten to the core. It just violates all principles of liberty and property rights, and yet they do it in the name of that. They say this was originally started to make sure we had a good, healthy, fair marketplace. Well, it didn't turn out that way. Chris?
Right, Dr. Paul. When you watch these speeches from Davos, they see the world as a machine that they're just going to flip some switches. They need to tweak a few things. I heard someone say, if 1 billion people stop eating meat, and I'm thinking to myself, how could you? Life is so complex. It's so intertwined, so interdependent. You can't possibly know the consequences of such a thing. You can't do such a thing in a vacuum and then just see what happens. The communists did that with collectivized farming. They came up with this bad idea, and then they had famine, because they view the world as, not as individuals, as almost like a machine, and they just have to, tweak things the right way. So this is very similar, and it's just not how life works. In fact, it ruins life. You can't tell 1 billion people not to eat meat. It was almost like with the vaccines. They just threw them out there without even knowing the consequences, and people even knew, we don't even know what the consequences are going to be. You can't do that. And now we have the consequences, and they're bad. And so many people are upset now. So when they talk about carbon and stop eating meat, you can't even take this seriously because it's such a bad idea. Life is far too complex to make such, silly, take such silly ideas seriously.
The people, the people in the Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum, had an influence because they're very wealthy and they're in special places and they've been around a lot. But not the average person didn't know about it. But the average person is starting to know a lot about wokeism. And they're in partnership now, and the forum is actually working closely with the woke people. And Chris, what you're describing there is wokeism, and it's a disaster. It's so ridiculous. And now people have started to wake up like they have over COVID and the monetary issues, so many things are waking up, but we just have to be much more bold and clear-cut on what the alternative has to be, because if there's another vacuum, somebody else is going to come in here. Right now, I'd say we're at a stage where you have the forum plus wokeism. It's a form of fascism, but it's not the fascism with boots, and guns, as much as it's an authoritarianism in combination with government. They're partners with the government. It's corporatism. And the other reason that it gets credit, that it is easier for them to sell their product, which is the same as if their boots are on the ground and they're using guns. But that's what really backs it up. I mean, the monetary system, the regulatory system, all this is backed up by IRS agents. You know, what was the most important thing that the president could do just recently? 87,000 new IRS agents. That's what our problem is. We need more IRS agents. So, but I think the debate is coming up. There's the difference, but they do point to one segment that is the challenger to the World Economic Forum and to wokeism, and that is the people who stand up and object to it, and this is what they get upset, because they're getting worried that the people are waking up, and that would be very beneficial to all of us. But the debate is out there, and I think it's just great. But I think our work is intensifying because it's more crucial. There's going to be a deadline to this. Some people expect the new reserve currency to be available and used more generously very, very soon. I'm more hesitant to say it's going to come, but I just don't think it's going to be easy to totally dethrone the dollar, because it has been so powerful. But the principle is there, and they're talking about currencies backed by gold and backed by oil, and escape the the amount of aggressiveness that we have with our foreign policy. There's a lot of anger thrown at us, and we like to blame somebody else. Some of these papers on the forum actually are talking about, we have to do ABC because the real enemy is China. Well, China has their problems, and we have to deal with them. But the whole thing is if you're just antagonizing, it's sort of like, oh yeah, there was a problem over there in Ukraine. There was a border problem that's been going on for a lot of years, and we have to get in there and settle it and look at what they did. But right now, I think it's wrong to decide that it's 100% China's fault and not ours, because we have benefited tremendously by issuing the reserve currency of the world, because that's free counterfeiting, and the world has been more or less forced into using it. They don't have a choice, but we get to print the money, and we don't even have the cost of paper because it's all on a computer. And then they take our money and they sell us stuff. They don't come over here and knock on our door and say, take this or else. They just make stuff that they think the Americans will buy. And Americans are flush with cash, less so now, but they have been, because we print money for our own people. And then we send all our money, and we export it. There's a good exporting of dollars. They go over there. But the people who say it's all China's fault are the ones who are saying, they can't come here, they can't come here, they can't buy this, they can't do this. Well, some of those rules might be necessary, but you have to realize it starts with passing out money that's counterfeit, and they spend it like they had expected to, and that's why people are getting nervous, and that's why we see the challenges now, by the states and others, because this whole idea of investing due to environmental reasons, I think it's going to pass by.
Very good, Dr. Paul. I will finish up. The goal, obviously, for these globalists is world government. It's an old idea. They're still chasing after it. It's a terrible idea. It's not to the purpose of government. And you can see they want global taxes, carbon taxes, wealth taxes. They want a piece of everybody around the world. You can see why they would want such a thing. But government, if it exists, and government does not have to exist, it's a man-made thing, it's not a force of nature, but if man decides to make government, it should be as local as possible. You can change your local government. You have some influence over the people that rule over you. In fact, you can locally even run for government. But the further out you go, the less influence you have. I have much less influence over my state than I do over this small town that I live in. And then the country, forget it. I feel like I have zero influence. Now, could you imagine the world if decisions are made in Switzerland on how you're supposed to live in your small little town? It's an absurd idea. so absurd. You even wonder why they even reach for this, ridiculous goal. But because everything is different, no matter where you are, where I am is much different than Switzerland. How can we have the same policies? But they don't think in those terms. They just think of power. I guess they get a thrill out of making rules that they think everybody's going to obey. So in any case, government must be local. This idea of world government, it'll fail. The sooner the better, and then hopefully, we keep them at bay for a good century or so.
Very good. The one thing is, there's a lot of planners. I believe that there is something that you can identify as the deep state. And they're not out in the open. The real deep state, they'll meet in Davos and a few other places, and we say, they're probably part of it all. But the people who decide on the big issues, who's going to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that sort of thing, there's groups of people who have a lot of influence. And that's been pretty secretive. But I think what's happening now is the people, the citizens now are looking around there. They recognize that, boy, this lockdown was crazy. Who was it? Oh, maybe Fauci had something to do with it. So they're starting to look more in depth. And that, I think, is good. But we have to let the people know what the alternative is. And we have trouble because the one thing that our enemies know is curtail freedom of speech. And that's why it's instrumental and so demanding for the large corporations and the people involved get control, of the social media. And then they went through this cancel program and censoring language and discussions. And they say, well, we're curtailing that, and Musk is helping, and this sort of thing. But the principle is still there. And that is intimidating. It's intimidating into our schools. They are intimidating the kids at the very beginning. Kids are saying, I would dare ask a question in class because of the peer pressure that's put on them to do this. So there's a lot to be changed, but the only thing that can ultimately change it is people getting the right information. That's why the First Amendment is so important. But I do want to talk a minute about the way the way people invest their money. People invest their money to make it productive. If you want to deal in a capitalist system, you work hard, you use what you have to use to survive, and you have leftover is capital. You can invest it, save it, or whatever, and you can go and loan it to other people who will invest it, and that's how the capitalist system works. But eventually, if the people accept, well, we need our money faster. Look how we need it for the wars. We had to get the $1 trillion to go to Ukraine and fight that war, and we had to get million trillions more to fight COVID. So you can't meet those demands without a Federal Reserve. So that's why we had a Federal Reserve, and just look at the tragedies we have. But the thing of it is, the problems build up until finally the market speaks and said, yeah, you've been inflating, you have been debasing the currency, and now, although you can't predict the day, that will always lower the value of the currency, sometimes faster than others. We're more now moving into the fast period of time of losing this confidence, but there'll be a lot of mistakes made because they destroy the most important thing in a free market, and that is the price of money, the interest rates. And that is the thing that the Fed does day in and day out, and you have all the experts saying, he started raising interest rates too long ago. Oh, no, it should have been before this, and it should be now, and stop. And they're arguing about it, but they can't know it. Even if you put very sincere, honest people there, they don't have any idea what the interest rate should be. Billions of people buying and selling and using money will determine the rate of interest. But anyway, what happens then is the bubbles get formed. And that's what has to happen. The market comes in and it says, we have to liquidate all the mistakes. But why we're in worse shape right now is because of ESG. The BlackRock people, they want to use, social nonsense for investments. And that's why we're going to protect the environment and do all these social things. They're social engineers by manipulating the money, and they had enough power to make it where it was beneficial in the short run because people were they were bought into this. It's only the money people where they're investing their money can we crack down on the abuse in the environment. So you have the interest rates in the Fed causing malinvestment, the running up of excessive debt, and then you have ESG making trillions of dollars of investment based on social engineering. And then when the crack comes, people get worried. So I would say, Larry Fink, get prepared. You have a lot more to worry about because there's a lot of mistakes in the market, and the market is all powerful. It always cleanses. They always win out. And I look at August 15th, 1971 was the gimmickry of the Federal Reserve from the time it started in 1913. And it's the last link to gold was we were converting dollars into gold up to 1971. And many people predicted, that's when I got interest, people were predicting, this can't last, it's going to come down. And it did. On August 15th, it came down. The market was saying, this is fake, and it's not working at all, so we'll have to have another fake system, and that's why we have the current system that we have now. Just as fake as the other one, but people want to believe in all kinds of conditions. You can't predict it, but one thing you can predict, though, is fiat money and counterfeit money and economic controls cannot overcome the mistakes made by deficits, government interference, over-regulations, artificial interest rates. They can't overcome it. The Fed says, yeah, we have to do this and give money, but we have to be the regulators because there will be some mistakes out there. So give us the power to regulate and we'll smooth this thing out and everything else. So if you have a little inflation, we know how to have a soft landing. Well, we're in the soft landing right now, and we're bouncing around a whole lot, and it's only started. We have a ways to go before the landing. But anyway, it's interesting stuff, but very, very dangerous. But I think there's some good stuff coming out now. Chris pointed out clearly why, there's a lot of articles out there about Davos, and that means that the information is getting out, and it's not positive. For 40 years, nobody ever cared. Now they're starting to care because the deep state is not so deep anymore, and now we have something that we can target and understand their mistakes in their economic and political philosophies. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.